Spider-Man, Peter Parker, is my favorite superhero, and he has been ever since I first saw the 90s animated series, shortly after sensing my sentience. I found Peter Parker to be relatable since he was just a nerdy kid trying to find himself in the world, and my connection to Peter would deepen as the Sam Raimi trilogy began to release during my early childhood.
The Amazing Spider-Man!
My name's the Human Spider.
I don't care, get out there.
No, he got my name wrong.
One of the first PS2 games I ever got was the Spider-Man movie tie-in game from 2002. From here, I would play the PS1 game Spider-Man 2 Inter Electro and continue to consume Spider-Man media, reading the comic books my school library had, and just thinking about the character, forming connections to my life. Spider-Man changed my life with its themes of self-sacrifice and its mantra, with great power comes great responsibility.
With great power comes great responsibility.
I've always found this mantra to be important in my life, equating power with knowledge and success. I didn't come from an advantaged background, so characters like Peter Parker became important role models in my life, and I always found myself wanting him to be my bigger brother, father, or friend.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Alongside other big media presences in my life, like Steve Irwin.
Right here in front of us now is the reason myself, my family, and my team put our life on the line.
I was content for Spider-Man to be just that, a character I personally identified with, never changing, beyond some story and character reboots and reimaginings, which function more as fun what-if scenarios. Something changed in 2011 though. I would always look at the Scholastic book catalog, yearning to order books I knew I was never going to be able to afford, and when I was a senior I encountered a Spider-Man comic with a brand new face, Miles Morales. At first, I was surprised to see a Spider-Man who wasn't Peter Parker, but that surprise ebbed quickly when I remembered other comics I had read in my younger days where Mary Jane, Gwen Stacy, or Peter's own daughter were Spider-Man. Peter Parker is Spider-Man, but Spider-Man isn't necessarily Peter Parker, and that's the way it had been for a long time in my life. Miles is black, and that was clear from the get-go, and I was instantly excited to meet this new character. But I had a major problem. There was no way I was going to be able to afford the issue. Like any other poor kid who couldn't afford to buy something they wanted, that didn't stop me from talking about it. And I vividly remember one conversation about the character before I moved on with my life, finding something else to focus on. Something I could actually get my hands on. It was a simple interaction, but it belied deeper social constructions that, at the time, I was ignorant of. I had shown my Scholastic book order booklet, with many of the books circled in the futile hope I'd someday be able to hold the texts in my hands. In one of those circles was the Miles Morales comic, and as I explained how much I wanted to read this comic, the person I was talking to said something like, "Oh, that's the Black Spider-Man." It was a non-committal statement, but it hinted at an edge of disinterest, which very well could just be because the person I was talking to didn't care about Spider-Man at all. Miles would leave my life.
Trade out of thought and time.
And he would stay gone until 2018 when Spider-Man, the Insomniac game, would release. As far as I know, this is Miles' first video game outing, and I liked him a lot in this game. I found him to be a great character, built up from the ground in a believable way, and at the end of the game, he would gain his spider powers. In fact, 2018 was just a great year for Miles in general, since Into the Spider-Verse came out that year as well. From the beginning, I considered Miles a good thing. As is clear from my early days, representation in media is important, and giving everyone at least one character they can identify with on one metric or another is something that needs to exist. There's a lot of evidence suggesting cultural representation has pronounced and significant impact on the people consuming that culture, as shown through Kenneth Clark's doll experiments in the 1940s. I'm not sure when the movement started exactly, but the internet, specifically both sides of the fanatical political spectrum, would create a digital war over representation in media, fighting in every comment section on every social media platform. We've seen this trend on YouTube itself with the rise and sometimes fall of Leafy, Shapiro, Tate, and others. One of these virtual battlefields was and still is diversity in video games, which some on this platform would call wokeness. I'm a teacher, and the Stop woke movement impacts my personal life daily, functioning as a knife in the dark looming ever closer to my neck with each passing day. Diversity in media matters for the same reason representation in media matters. People need to see themselves in the media they consume. That is a fact, and after all, facts do not care about feelings. It is also a fact that people of color and other minorities have historically been portrayed poorly in media. Anytime a game with diversity fails to meet expectations, the consistent slogan in the comments section is, "Go woke, go broke." And it is always frustrating for me to see this type of discourse because it is never because of the diversity that a game fails. There are always some other large issues with the design of the failed game holding it back, but those issues are either downplayed or outright ignored to push a political narrative, which is ironically enough the exact thing the go woke, go broke crowds say they are rallied against. And to be fair, sometimes this crowd has a point, with the key word being here sometimes, as in rarely. Recently, the Netflix Cleopatra quote-unquote documentary has come under fire for miscasting Cleopatra on top of perpetuating false information despite claiming to be a well-researched product.
I remember my grandmother saying to me, "I don't care what they tell you in school, Cleopatra was black."
In cases like this, where historical figures are being misrepresented, I think diversity is a bad thing because it is completely counter to the facts of history. I feel the same way about John Wayne's Genghis Khan or any other cases of whitewashing. When you're talking about someone's cultural figure or a key piece of their history, they can't and shouldn't be changed to meet the political push of a present zeitgeist. John Wayne was casted as Genghis Khan because of Hollywood's racism, and Adele James's casting as Cleopatra is likewise incorrect. This happens in long-running franchises such as Spider-Man, where diversity is added to something that didn't have diversity from its earliest conceptions. This matters since people identify so closely with the characters on display. Changing that character to no longer reflect them is problematic, and it makes sense there'd be such a large pushback from doing something like that. That's not to say the rebooting of a character has never changed things core to their original identity to make them more diverse, but it is never a major, fan-backed character. Stan Lee once said Spider-Man couldn't be reframed as gay because he was never designed with that type of identity in mind. He has always been on a continuum with Mary Jane or Gwen Stacy, and separating them wouldn't feel right. Making Gwen Stacy gay is something Spider-Man 2 does, so it's not like changing something like this can't happen, but Gwen Stacy is a minor character relative to Peter Parker himself. Miles, however, isn't Peter Parker. He's a new character, and he's a character that stands on his own two legs, not relying exclusively on diversity to sell his inclusion into the Spider-Verse. That's the key difference. Marvel has done a difficult deed, adding diversity to a long-running franchise, and I'm so happy that they did. That being said, I didn't play Miles Morales when it launched in 2021 because I accepted that this Spider-Man just wouldn't be for me. I'm not the target audience, being almost 30 and Miles being a teenager. That was fine for me, and I was happy that others were getting their Spider-Man connection the same way I did in the late 90s and early 2000s. Spider-Man 2 proved me wrong in this case as well though, because I love Miles in this game. My enjoyment of the character doesn't come from his high school adventures or anything like that, since those sections are my least favorite to play through because, once again, I'm almost 30. However, I love analyzing the way Miles' inclusion in Spider-Man 2 functions as a model of how to introduce inclusivity to long-running franchises. I know Miles has been a character in Spider-Man lore for over 10 years now, but the movies and his game appearances are new, demonstrating the character's ability to stand on its own within all major media contexts. Marvel and Insomniac pack in a lot of diversity with the character of Miles and his supporting cast. It's been a long time since we've had a character in a major media piece express double consciousness, and I like the way Miles does so in this game, albeit in subtle ways. Double consciousness is a social construct, and the term was initially coined by W.E.B. Du Bois in his book The Souls of Black Folk, released all the way back in 1903. The idea is simple. It is is a social construction that a person has two social selves, and that they need to be aware of those social selves at all times. W.E.B. Du Bois was specifically exploring the way black people have to view themselves through black and white eyes when he first coined the term, but since its 1903 debut, the term can be applied to a myriad of other social contexts, later developing into intersectionality, the idea that every single individual thing that has happened in our lives makes up who we are and impacts the way we view the world. Miles is black and Latino, existing simultaneously in two different social contexts, and this is shown through his relationship with his uncle and his mother. There's a lot he gains as a character from this, such as his bilingualism and his understanding of social differences between people, something that makes his connection to other characters in his section of the Spider-Man cast make sense, something we'll get into later on in this video. I wish the social construct would have been explored more explicitly in Spider-Man 2, since it is something people still go through to this day, and having a character in a massive media property navigate the nuances of it would have been great to see. That notwithstanding, Spider-Man 2 does plenty of other things to introduce diversity beyond a simple surface level inclusion. Alongside Miles, Haley enters into the franchise, essentially functioning as Miles' Mary Jane. The teen romance between Miles and Haley is as believable as the one between Mary Jane and Peter, and I could definitely see their relationship being presented in some great ways as the characters age. Miles and Haley have a great teen romance, and there's an implicit promise here that they'll have a great adult one as well. And having two black characters maintaining a balanced, healthy relationship into adulthood is a massive W for all younger people. We all know TikTok and other social media platforms set younger people up with corrupted ideas of what makes a healthy relationship, and it's nice to know they have at least one example of a healthy one to refer back to. Even people my age fall into this social media messaging, which is why I say this is a good thing for all people. Haley is especially a great character for diversity since she's deaf, and her deafness is never something that holds her back from success as an artist. In fact, her deafness is used as a reason for why she's so good at art, since she used art to express herself when she was struggling to learn how to sign. Signing in general is a consistent thing in Spider-Man 2 since Miles and Genki both know how to do so. This particular aspect of Spider-Man 2's inclusion shows how Miles' side of the Spider-Verse represents promoting diverse people, while Peter's side of the webbed equation represents the long, traditional history of the franchise. History and social shifts are represented through Haley's art as well. The inspiration for her art is a combination of Afrofuturism and Black history, putting her race into conversation with her artistic expression. There's a side quest in the game where Haley helps clean up bad graffiti with some of her own better art until she's able to convince the graffiti artist that their art is good and they don't need to mark it out. The marking out of art is what makes it look bad, not the fact that it is graffiti itself. I like this inclusion as well because for a long time graffiti was shut down as harshly as possible, despite it being a medium of expression for urban kids. This adds layers to the representation, accounting for Haley's ability, race, sex, and home. All of these characteristics make her who she is and are inseparable from her. You can't separate the United States from race since both things are inextricably linked from their earliest days, and this history is represented through Haley's hair. Now this statement might sound like an odd claim for anyone who isn't a black woman, but let me cook for a second. In Noliwe M. Rooks' book, Hair Raising, Beauty, Culture, and African American Women, she writes, not only was skin color positioned as indicative of intelligence and civilization, but hair texture and facial features were also highlighted as speaking to one's position in the hierarchy of humanity. What she's referring to is the way hair straighteners were marketed towards black women as their only way to achieve beauty and to ascend in the social hierarchy. Women were impacted by the perceived beauty, and this social pressure is what would leave many black women to straighten their hair post-slavery. This basically communicates to these women that their natural hair is not good enough to be seen as beautiful, which is a bogus social construct. If you're going to integrate diversity into a long-running franchise, you better commit to the bit, and Insomniac has done so here. During the 7th generation, there was a consistent trope among most early games where the main character has short, cropped hair, and the reason for this is that rendering complex hair was impossible at the time. Machines just didn't have the processing power, and game engines couldn't handle the need for individual hairs on characters' heads. However, it's been almost 20 years since that generation began. With modern hardware, engines, and cultural representation trends, natural black hair is possible to model in a way that looks realistic, as displayed through Haley. Why does any any of that matter? It matters because Haley is a minor character in the story. She isn't on screen for very often, yet Insomniac found it important to get her right for the hour or so she is on screen over the course of Spider-Man 2's runtime. This screams they paid special care towards representation in their game, spending time and resources on the proper portrayal of Miles and Haley perfectly, because let's not forget or ignore that Miles' hair is on point as well. Why does Insomniac's integration of diverse representation work where so many others have failed to convincingly do so? It has to do with a few things. Firstly, Miles, his family, and Haley are all new characters. There's no destruction of ingrained connections between the audience and the characters they've loved since childhood. Secondly, Insomniac committed to the diversity in their game, making sure the characters are represented perfectly and paying special attention to hair and culture. Miles is his own man, or at least he will be once he gets out of the high school part of his story. He doesn't replace Peter even though he takes over as the sole Spider-Man, because the memory of Peter is not tarnished by a concerted effort to remove him from his own franchise. Miles and Peter live in perfect coexistence, which should always be the final goal of diversity. Diversity needs to exist in games to give everyone representation of themselves so that they can learn and develop in a healthy way. Likewise, these types of characters help branch the divide between diverse groups who otherwise wouldn't be able to understand one another. This is partly why I subscribe to the idea that the Tom Holland trilogy of Spider-Man movies should have been a Miles Morales trilogy, but that is a topic for another time. I'm glad Insomniac did this because I genuinely want more Miles Morales after this game and the Spider-Verse films. I'm definitely going to go back to the Miles Morales game, hopefully next year, because I need more from these characters. There are some allusions made in Spider-Man 2 to Miles Morales that just went over my head. I want to know the context for those scenes. I grew up loving the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, making me a longtime fan. The show doesn't have a diverse cast, but over the last 10 years, long-standing franchises have been becoming diversified, which is a great thing. However, diversity is a tricky thing to add to a franchise where entire generations of people have come to identify with the characters within. One way around this qualm is rebooting the franchise, but far more effective than that is the creation of equal or superior characters within the same franchise. Miles Morales and Haley are the quality characters that act as the new kids relative to Peter and Mary Jane. They do not replace Peter or MJ, and it seems to me that the primary reason why people complain about diversity decisions in modern media is the attempt to rewrite and remake old characters instead of making new ones. People have strong connections to old characters, and creating something new is of paramount importance. Spider-Man 2 shows how to do this with a long-running franchise, and the diversity on display in this game is an absolute masterclass in adding diversity to modern media. And that's the video, guys. What's your favorite case of diverse representation in media? Let me know in the comments section below, and if you like the video, please like, share, subscribe, and ding that bell for more really diverse gaming content. Have an awesome day, gamers.